Of Leadership Live. I'm JJ Hardy, and I'm here with Chris Pienkowski. How you doing today, Chris?
Morning, JJ. I'm doing well. How about you?
Oh man, it's early and it's kind of refreshing. I like to get stuff out of the way early. A buddy of mine and I, we always used to joke in the military and say, according to compared to the rest of the population, I think we get more done by 9 o'clock in the morning than most of the population gets done in a whole day. And so I like doing things early. It kind of gives me that same feeling.
Wasn't that an advertising slogan back in the day for the Army? Like, we get more done before 9 a.m. than normal people do during a whole day. Something like that. Like,
I don't know. I know that they said it in a lot of movies.
Yeah, okay.
But no,
Well,
I mean,
it's true. Getting up at dark 30 and doing a whole bunch of stuff before 9 o'clock is not uncommon in the military.
No, it is not. But it's been a couple weeks, Chris. How have things been going for you?
Good, man. No complaints. Just kind of moving along, making things happen. How about you?
Chugging along as well. Just continue. I actually just published, and it hasn't been approved by Amazon yet, but my next book, it's actually a lessons learned from my life book that I've been working on for almost a year. It's about to be published, and it's called Speak Up, Show Up, Lead. It's going to be for sale here pretty soon, and I'm really excited to start talking about it once I can hold one in my hand and show it to the screen. But that's kind of my latest development. But anyway, we're here this morning to talk about how to make change happen, and it's our final one in this series.
Mm-hmm.
And then towards the end of the episode, we're going to advertise what we're going to do next. But when I say how to make change happen, with everything else that we've talked, what's something different that you would like to point out about specifically how to make change happen?
So, I was just going through my notes for the previous 3 episodes. So we've talked about culture. We've talked about, change management as a whole. We've talked about embracing change. And some of the things that we've alluded to, but not really gone deep in, is action, right? Action is what makes change happen. And it's not just seeing the action of your people to make that change happen, but it's you too. It's you rolling up your sleeves and being willing to, stand side by side with your people, and really get things done, problem solve, understand what challenges they're facing so that you can lead them in the right direction. So
yeah,
I think we're taking it from, I don't want to say theory, but I think we're taking it from words to actions right now.
Word to action. Action. One of my favorite things to talk about is taking action, because all the leadership stuff that we talk about is great, but the implementation part is always the hardest. And so taking action, when you said that, it struck me as, well, that's actually the most important, because you can talk about things all day long. You can figure out what your timeline is. You can talk about who does what, and they can brief you on how they're going to do that and the whole 9 yards. But until you actually execute it, it doesn't happen. So what's interesting about the action when it comes to change management is that it never goes to plan. And so there's something there that I was thinking about, that, how to react to that. And we talked a little bit about that, and again, it was just kind of alluding to it as we were going over many points. But when you take action, there needs to be a way to react to change, and not just the change that you expect to happen, but the change that you don't.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to be flexible, right? You have to be, if you have your eyes open, you can see the change coming, or you can see where you may need to react, hopefully, right? Not to say that a curveball doesn't come out of, left field sometimes, but you've got to be able to kind of change on the fly. Like, one of the biggest pieces about change management is the focus on kind of iterating as you go, right? You understand this is the goal that we want to achieve. This is the change in the organization that we want to affect. But I think that sometimes people will get hung up on, in order to achieve that goal, I need to plan out all 100 steps that it takes to get there. And I know that we've talked about this a little bit, but it's really planning out those first 5 steps and just getting moving, because you're going to be so lucky if you get even as far as step 10 going the way that you planned.
Right.
So change management is also about adapting to your environment, adapting to what happens. What's the Marine Corps saying? Improvise, adapt, overcome.
Yep.
And that has to be part of your mindset as you're going through a change management exercise.
It's true. And you brought up something that's interesting too, because you can get trapped as a leader in that analysis paralysis. So,
absolutely.
We've talked about the analysis paralysis, so I'm not going to get caught there, but I will say, not just taking action, but decisive action, not getting caught up in the details, just getting to a point where you say, you know what, we're done. Let's do it. That's a good leadership quality, because a lot of people, they don't like change. You and I, we've talked about that over and over again, but because they don't like change, they get caught up in finding that next thing they can make better, finding that next thing that they can make better, and going over this cycle of, oh, I'm gonna, oh gosh, I'm probably shouldn't be saying, but I'm gonna sit here and pussyfoot around a little bit, and and I'm not ever gonna actually start. So that decisive action, not just taking action, but that decisive action is really what gets you going. And the adaptability portion, of course you have to adapt. If you're not adapting in your day-to-day work, which I know you are as a leader, I mean, especially in the job that you're doing now, I have a business, so I definitely have to adapt or else I die. So it's just making sure that you plan enough, just enough to where you have a roadmap. When you have that roadmap, you can take that decisive action, and at least you have a place to steer yourself. And if you steer yourself too far in the wrong direction, then you know where you can course correct and go back to. So that adaptability, it's measured, but just know that mistakes and all kinds of craziness will happen. And it doesn't matter what operation you end up planning. When you're making a change in your organization, or if you're doing a new exercise or whatever, then there will be mistakes along the way.
Absolutely. And that, I know that right now we're talking about kind of the final leg, right? Which is making change happen, the action part of this 4-piece series that we're talking about. But the setting expectations that we talked about a few episodes ago, you have to be super clear in setting those expectations that we will be changing along the way. We will be iterating along the way. I do not expect this to be perfect. It is not going to be seamless and 100% smooth all the time. So you have to plant those seeds when you first start talking about the change management that you're about to go through, so that by the time action happens, people have heard it multiple times. Like, all right, we're going to get so far and we're going to learn as we go. We're going to adapt. We're going to improvise. Then it doesn't come as a shock to the system when something happens and people are like, oh shit, we didn't plan for this. Right. We talked about it 2 weeks ago when we were kicking this off, that we don't know all the unknowns. So we haven't planned for everything, and let's be ready to, bob and weave, for lack of a better word, when those things happen.
Well, and I've really gotten to like your leadership stoplight. So I think that's a good time. Probably one of the final steps before you actually take action is to let people know, hey, this is when you absolutely have to make change. This is when we're getting a little bit off course, but this is the green light. This is when you just keep pressing forward. So, I mean, I do like that leadership stoplight. You talk about that thing all the time. The first couple times you said it, I know I laughed about it a little bit, but that's just because I never heard it before. But
Sure.
it's so clever in that we in the military we always used your sight picture. If you go too far left or too far right, then you need to come and talk to me about it. But if you're always staying in your lane, then you're never really going to have a problem. And so it's a similar concept. I think that the leadership stoplight is just a little more measured. So when it comes to setting expectations, I think that's both of those are actually great ways to kind of set that up.
Yeah. But the key is to get the buy-in on, like when those trigger points are. And part of the taking action is you as the leader, helping your people to navigate that uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where you need to be level-headed as the leader, knowing that it's not going to be as you planned. So if you freak out when something gets in the way that was unanticipated, then your people are going to freak out too. So that action requires you to be calm. It requires you to be measured in your responses. You may feel like freaking out on the inside, but that's the old saying, like, never let them see you sweat. Hey, you can maybe in the post-mortem, you could talk about, man, there was that one part of this project that I thought we were going to get completely off the rails. And honestly, everybody, I was freaked out. I think it's okay to show that vulnerability post-action, but when you're in the thick of it, it's got to be like, all right, everybody, this is what we kind of trained for. We knew that things were going to happen that we didn't see coming, and now we need to adjust and move forward.
Well, but you bring up a good point, and I want to kind of break that down into small chunks, because not at the end is when you should talk about, what the things you overcame, but even daily, like say we talked about the office move a couple different times during this change management thing. There's no reason why in a daily update brief to say, hey, I did this, but I still have to do this, and this is what I'll execute tomorrow, and having each section brief what they're doing. And by the way, that can be used in any operation. An office move is just a really annoying one. So what I will say is that when those briefs happen, there's no reason why at the end of it all, you as the leader or you as the briefer can say, but we had these struggles, but we overcame it by doing this. And in a way that kind of celebrates those small wins. Yes. And when you celebrate those small wins with the team, then it also creates more buy-in, because we've always said that the why is the most important. And the why is the most important because that buy-in that you talked about a couple minutes ago, that's how that is created. And so if you keep people on pace, knowing that, yeah, we've made mistakes, this all sucked throughout the day to day, but we did win because we got this far, then they know that they're on track and that you're not upset for the small things that did go wrong and all that other stuff. And just, that's really, really important when you're making change, because people got to know that, yeah, it's messy, but you are winning.
That's such a really good point, because it's that's what builds the morale as you go. And I'm just kind of picturing in my head, right? It's not waiting for the after action, but it may be that next day where you're doing that stand-up meeting and you say, man, what happened yesterday, that was a close one. But team, you all came through, you adapted, you got through this, and now we have a better understanding of our path. Like, those midway points of also showing vulnerability, I think strengthens the team. And then you get the people looking around, they're like, okay, so I wasn't the only one who thought that we were like right on the edge there. Like, right. Our leader saw it too. So good.
Yep. But acknowledging that that wasn't the end of the line. I mean, just because you made that mistake, that wasn't it. We did overcome that. And maybe we didn't 100% exceed in that area, but we definitely succeeded here, and here. And so, I mean, everyone makes mistakes. If if throughout the course of your entire job, you don't give your people, I wouldn't say permission to make mistakes, but letting them know that they're human and mistakes will happen.
Yes.
And letting them know, I'm human, I make mistakes. I'm sure somewhere along the way that you will as well, and we'll get through it together. I'm not just gonna punish you, like some managers and supervisors and directors will. Then that actually kind of sets the stage for more trust and rapport building as well. And you want that. I mean,
Yep.
not just in change management, but you want that at work. You not only want that, but you need that. That's how you bring your teams closer together.
Absolutely.
But the communication part is extremely important. I'm not going to go too super deep into it, but making sure that, again, even during the execution stage, that the stuff you talked about on the communication chain, it wasn't just planned, that it's also being executed, because the communication part of any operation is going to be the most crucial. Making sure that as things progress, that whether it's picking up the phone and saying we got this done, closing it out somehow, or maybe you're just updating it for a brief, or maybe you're just letting everybody on your team know, hey, good job, let's move on to the next thing, or however you set up that communication, that at the execution stage where you're making that change, that is probably one of the most crucial things that you can do is make sure that you're constantly communicating with your team and making sure that they're communicating with you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So what
ahead.
other things from making change happen, we're talking about this is the final piece, but this is not a one and done, right?
No.
Making the change happen, it kind of starts right after you've laid out, the concept of the change, right? Your con op, and now it's action needs to happen right then. So what is it that is it setting time frames? Is it setting milestones? Which is all part of the planning process. But again, we can only plan so far, knowing that we're going to be iterating along the way.
Well, it all started with a vision for something specific. And
Right.
it all started with, that could also be called commander's intent. There's also the mission, whatever you want to call it,
Yep.
but making sure that was clear in the beginning, and making sure that along the way, you're constantly reminding people of what the end part of that change looks like, but also making sure that that you talk about what those next steps are. Once we get this done, and this is a new part of our operation, how do we sustain it? Because the sustainment is just as important as the change itself. And when you're incorporating something new into your operation, whether it's a new office location and you just had to move there, or if it's maybe now you're adding a new dock into your warehouse, and so you had to incorporate some change to make sure you're moving stuff over there and getting that dock ready, and the manning and all that other stuff. It doesn't really matter what it is, but now that you've made that change, you've started incorporating that new thing into your operation, or you started doing that new thing, how do you sustain that? I think sustainment is a very, very important part of the change itself.
I agree. And that's where you start to get into the measurements, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's when you want to make sure that something is happening on an ongoing basis, now you can create metrics around it. And the old saying is you can't manage what's not measured.
Right.
So along the way, you're going to have benchmarks and milestones that you want to be hitting, because it's going to lead to the eventual end goal. Once you get to that end goal, now it's going to be about, all right, how do we measure that we're effective, we're efficient, and even that we're getting better, right? Your goal shouldn't be to get here and stay here. It should be, we need to get here, but then now is where we kind of look for ways to improve. This is our new baseline, and now we're going to measure it and figure it out along the way.
Well, it's not end measure to figure it out along the way. Yeah, but say you're adding a new dock to your warehouse.
Mhm.
You know, if the system you were using, because everyone uses some sort of of a of a computer system to manage everything that they're doing, and then they have to look at numbers and all that stuff. But once you make that shift, it might not work out the way you thought it would. So, you can measure the metrics, but if you have to rely on your people. So there's the people aspect of this, not just the systems aspect of this. And you have to be constantly engaging those people once the operation is set in place, because they're going to know probably better than you do how to make that more efficient. I don't know, because you've been part of the ground crew before.
Yeah.
So have I.
Yeah.
And how many times do you hear, "Oh my gosh, this is so stupid. If I was in charge, I'd be doing it this way." Well, I'm
That's
I'm
right.
glad you said that, Joe Snuffy. So tell me more about that. I
Yep.
mean, don't you want to encourage an environment where the suggestions are encouraged, not squashed down, so that when Joe Snuffy has this, "Man, this is so stupid," aha moment, that he goes to a manager, or he comes to you if you are his direct supervisor, or whatever the case may be, and has that conversation about what that is. But make it a productive conversation. Don't make it just I'm going to sit here and let Joe Snuffy complain at me for 45 minute session. No, teach them how to make that productive. If you really think something can be made better, how can it be made better? And then what would you do to implement that, sort of a thing, instead of this sucks and I don't think we should be doing this thing.
That's a great point, because it becomes, the curiosity of leadership.
Yep.
And, which is so important, because you can have somebody who says, if I was in charge, I would do it this way. And then the leader can automatically turn around, just like they're, a 7-year-old out on the playground, and say, "Well, if you can do it better, then go ahead." Right.
Uh-huh.
And that's the exact opposite of what you want.
Yep.
You want to engage and say, "Oh, share some thoughts here."
Yeah.
You need to be able to subordinate your ego and say, "You know what? You do know more about this than I do, being on the ground. So let's talk. Like,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts here? What am I doing wrong?" I can't tell you how many times that has opened doors, that when I've asked that question as a leader, "Hey, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Tell me what I'm not seeing that you're seeing." And number one, you disarm whatever freak out people are having about, "Oh, I know what's going on the ground level, and you're sitting over in your office and you don't know jack about what's going on here." As soon as I put that blame back on myself as a leader and say, "What did I do wrong? What do I not see that you see?" Now, all of a sudden, I've given you authority over me in that case. And people are like, "Dang,
Yeah.
now
Well,
you trust me." Like, that additionally builds trust.
Well, and let's be honest. I mean, for anyone who is maybe not at the management level yet, who might be listening to this, or maybe you're new to management and you haven't really gotten a taste of what management could be, what leadership in management could be, then there's one thing that you have to know. You may have been that person on the ground saying these things that Chris just got done saying about, you know, they don't know what's happening down here. And you know what the manager knows? He knows that's right. And that's okay. There's a design when it comes to a management and leadership structure. The people on the ground doing all of the labor absolutely should know more about what's going on than the supervisor. The
Mhm.
supervisor should know what's more about what's going on than the manager. The manager should know more about what's going on than the director. The director should know more than the CEO, or whatever the case, the VP, whatever. And if you can kind of make that very clear when somebody takes their first leadership position, then they can articulate that better, especially when they're brand new. Because guess what? If they tell you what they think, then the conversations can be productive and you can make the change happen the way you need it to, so that you don't want to accommodate everybody. That's not what I'm saying here.
Right.
But efficiencies can happen, but they're not going to happen while everybody is just, dang it, bitching, moaning, and complaining while they're doing their work. You have to have productive conversations, and you have to let people know that you're supposed to know more about what's going on than I do. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, that was such a great point, and we have to make sure that that is perfectly clear, because a lot of managers don't make that clear to their people, and they will just tell them, this is what you're getting paid to do. Stop complaining. But that is the worst thing you can say to somebody.
Exactly.
That is the worst thing you can say. But, if you can say, I appreciate that you're having a hard time and that you're complaining, but if there really is something that can be done to make this a little bit better, tell me more about it.
Right.
If you're just venting, well, I guess let's move on and get through this together. But you don't ever just don't just shut your people up. That is the worst thing you can possibly do.
Yeah. And I know we're getting ready to wrap up, but on the venting part, just real quick, it's okay to ask your people if it seems like, number one, encourage that communication, right? Encourage that your people talk to you. And it's okay for you to say to them, hey, I want to understand what we want to walk away with from this conversation. Are we looking for a solution, or do you just need to blow off some steam? I can be here in either way, but I just want to set my own expectations. Is this a problem-solving session, or, is this a little bit of a vent session? And both of them are fine. So sometimes people do just need to get things off their chest. I learned that years ago from my wife, because I would always want to solve things, and she would say, I'm not looking for a solution here. I just need to talk it through. Okay. Hey, there's a leadership application here. Let's see where else I can use this.
It's just hard because when you're at home, you just want to solve all the problems in the world, but your wife never ever she hardly ever wants that. Don't solve her problems. Just hear her out. Oh man, that could be a whole other conversation sometime. But
100%.
But you're right. And I'll give my closing thoughts on change management here, because we're wrapping up our series on that. But I will just say, throughout the course of change management, and especially the execution, and I'll even move on to say in the sustainment phase, you have to expect that there are going to be mistakes. You have to give people permission, letting them know that they are human to make mistakes. You have to encourage communication. And the one thing that we didn't talk about today that we probably should have a little bit, that you have to take ownership of all the successes and failures in that process, both during the change, during the planning, and in the sustainment phase. So change can happen. And that's really all I have to say. What do you have to add to that, Chris?
I don't think there's much more to add to that. Communication, willingness to accept when you need to change and when you're wrong are going to be your biggest pieces, your biggest things in your arsenal to use in order to make that change happen. So clear vision of where you want to be, communicating it, and knowing that it's not going to be an easy path to get there, and accepting that.
Right.
And just rock and roll.
Rock and roll. Shake and bake. Yep. I like it.
Right.
So our next series in a couple of weeks, which will be on the 26th, we're going to start talking about dealing with people.
Yep.
Now, don't take that out of context. That we're going to start off talking about accepting responsibility. So that's what that topic will be about that day. But we're going to be also discussing things like EQ, which is emotional intelligence, and relationships at work. We're going to talk about difficult people or difficult conversations. And then we're going to talk about the art of constructive feedback. So it's not just dealing with people, but it's dealing with the situations that come up with the process of managing is really what that boils down to.
Yes.
I'm excited to talk about it with you, Chris.
Me too.
And do you have any closing? Do you want to talk about anything that about our next topics to before we close out?
I mean, a lot of those topics are really core to leadership. And honestly, I'm surprised that we haven't. I know that we've dabbled in each of those topics over the past couple of years, but to chain a series together about it, I'm really looking forward to it because it's so relatable in every leadership aspect.
Yeah, those specific things, I think especially new managers, right? There are concepts and things that every new manager really has struggles with. So I think that it's going to be valuable, and senior managers as well. So I think it's going to be really valuable to get some perspective on this while we're talking about it. And again, if you're in the audience, make sure you're communicating. Thank you for following me and Chris on this journey of Leadership Live. Thank you for following me on my journey through all the other crap that I'm doing in my podcast and Victory Leadership Coaching and all that other stuff. And we'll see you all in a couple of weeks.
Yes, sir. Have a great day.